everybody, welcome once again to Transform Church Online. I can't wait to get into the message and hear what our speaker has for us today. But before we do, please do us a favor by sharing this broadcast on your social media platforms so we can reach each other with these live transforming messages. This is as simple as clicking the thumbs up icon on Facebook, and if you are joining us on YouTube, please do the same, and also don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We would love to see you in person, so please visit us at 88 Agar Drive. That's in the western suburbs of Melbourne. Now, as we get into the message, feel free to engage with us and share your thoughts on the message, or just say hi and let us know where you are joining us from. Let's jump right into it now and join our speaker for today, Pastor Gregory J. Williams, as he brings us this message titled God with Us, Episode 3, In the Storm.
Let's get into our series this morning. We're in the series called God with Us, right? God with Us. And in this series, we're looking into how we actually grow in our faith walk, right? How does God move in our life, especially when we have difficult, challenging, depressing situations that occur in our life? How does God move, right? And here we're exploring how God moves even in the most difficult circumstances. The circumstances that might not appear good to us, but God can use for good for us, for our ultimate good. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome, and I hope that you really find yourself at home in this place. We're a church, as I said, and we love to impact our community. We love to speak into the things that are happening in your life, in your circumstances, and I believe that God is going to speak into that today. And so Transform Church is a place where we welcome people, we welcome questions, and we love to help you on that journey in life. And so we all acknowledge, right, there's some difficult seasons in our life. They throw us for a loop. We have times where we even question the very existence of God. And if you're a Christ follower, sometimes you're feeling like your faith is very low when circumstances come in that throw you in a different place that you're not expecting. And so this series is a perfect series for you to get to know how God actually uses all things in our world to help us become what He desires to do. And today, we want to help you see what happens when you go through difficult seasons. So as we're exploring the Christmas story, the journey of Mary and Joseph as they travel to Bethlehem, they had to traverse through some difficult terrain. They had to go up through some mountains, some valleys, and difficult circumstances. It wasn't an easy journey for them to get there, especially Mary, who was very pregnant, right? And it would have been a very treacherous journey, but they traveled to Bethlehem, and we're kind of paralleling their journey with some of the different situations we encounter in our world, right? And so we've been looking at, in the last few episodes, we talked about being in the valley, we talked about being in the wilderness, and so today we're going to talk about being in the storm. I don't know if you've ever been in a hurricane. When I traveled to Barbados with Chanel, a couple of days after we landed there, they announced that there was a tropical storm that was going to hit Barbados, and it was actually quite a big storm that they could upgrade into a hurricane. And the hotel we were staying at, well, they kind of decided to give us some warnings. They gave us, announcements, sometimes daily announcements, sometimes hourly announcements to let us know the status of this hurricane or storm that was going to hit us. And we were actually right on the beach, right? We were on this beach hotel. And so it was kind of surreal because the weather wasn't actually indicating that there was any storm. It was bright, it was sunny, the temperature was great, the sea looked blue, amazing color. Never seen a sea that blue in my life. And it was just bright and sunny, but everyone was running around trying to get ready for this hurricane or storm. And they put up big boards on the windows that were facing, the sea. They stapled them into the wood. And I was like, wow, Chanel, they're really taking this seriously. And then Chanel made such an important statement. She said, they know how to prepare for a storm. So often in life, we are unprepared for the storms that hit us, right? Emotionally, physically, financially, mentally, they seem to come out of nowhere sometimes and hit us, and we are thrown to the ground. We feel paralyzed. We don't know what to do. It's like we're caught up in all of these things, like in a storm, and we can't tell whether we're going or we're coming. But the way you operate in a storm is not the normal way you operate in life, because the circumstances, the environment has changed. And so you can't expect to operate the same way in a storm as you do in the normal course of life. Things have changed. You have to learn how to navigate through, because if you don't, the storm will overwhelm you. It could set you back in life if you entered unprepared. You have to prepare and change how you do life. And even if it's just for the period that you're in the storm, because the enormity of the storm demands attention. And so we sometimes have to cease from our daily activity, our daily routine, to change how we deal with the storms that come in our life. And let me give you an example of what they did to adapt to the storm. As I said, we were right on the beach, and so the hotel boarded up all their windows. They got all of their lawn chairs, they got all of their beach chairs, they got all the things around the pool, they took them, they put them in the spare room, and if they didn't have any spare room, they put them in sheds, and they locked everything down, and anything that could be taken by the wind, they actually anchored them to the ground. They closed the restaurant. There was no food there at night. Things were changing. They canceled the movie on the beach, which I was upset about. And it still was not blowing wind or anything. It was still normal activity, but they were preparing, right? And so they dropped off the night before a big bag of supplies with extra toiletries and water and any emergencies you might need. And they had a note saying, you need to stay in your room. Breakfast at the hotel is canceled tomorrow. There's going to be no service in the hotel room. So what you have to do is you need to let us know what your breakfast is, and you need to pick it up at 9 p.m. tonight, because you're not allowed to leave your room tomorrow, because that's when the storm was supposed to hit. This is what a storm does in our life. We might get thrown around, because when the storm hits, you can be acting and doing things the way you normally do things. Your situation, your outlook, your perspective has to change. It happens to us all across the seasons of our life. Your parents have a crisis that affects you. You have to stop what you're doing and pay attention to what's happening in their life. Your company made a bad decision and you're laid off because they're bad decisions. That affects you. It affects you financially. Someone you trusted in your life let you down and betrayed you, and that leaves you being emotionally and mentally scarred because you trusted this individual and now they've left you, feeling really upset. Your marriage is going through some difficult seasons, and you're thinking, I don't think we're going to make it. Huge implications when storms hit our life. And sometimes we get into this mental thinking when we are in a season when the storm is so overwhelming that we think we're going to be there forever, and our mental state begins to change, and we get very negative thinking, right? We start thinking, I guess I'm never going to get married. I can't find anyone. I guess I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. Not true, but we may exaggerate it. I'm never going to get out of debt. I'm going to have to be in this situation financially bankrupt for the rest of my life. Not true, but we think it. I'm never going to have a child. I'm never going to graduate. I'm never going to have anything good in my life. I'm always going to be depressed. In a storm, we kind of get into this mental state of thinking all these things. Have you ever had something like that occur in your life, where things were going well, everything was going great, and then all of a sudden, bam, out of nowhere, you got thrown for a loop, something happened, something pulled you down, something distracted you, something caused you to pause and look around and say, what's going on? It affects us in so many ways. So you must know what it feels like to be in a storm. And even if you have not, you will. Because life throws us for a loop all the time. And what I noticed about our experience at the hotel is that they anchored everything. They battened down the hatches, the windows, the doors, everything was boarded up. They screwed in those boards, right? And the things that could fly away, they anchored down. The wind could take things and cause it to be something of a projectile that could damage and hurt someone. And eventually, we all find ourselves in a difficult season in our life. And what we need is to have an anchor in the middle of the storm, where we need to be anchored into something. As Christ followers, most of us understand that our anchor is actually Jesus. But if you are exploring faith this morning, if you're trying to figure out what this Christianity thing is all about, if you come here and you're saying, I'm just come because someone invited me, I want you to lean in and listen and understand why Jesus is so important to Christ followers, because he is the anchor for our lives. As the storms rage around us, and eventually, even if you're not in one now, you will hit it. We that follow Christ have an anchor for our soul. So I want you to lean in and listen why Christ is so central to who we are and what we believe. Because when we go through the storm, I repeat, we all will, Jesus is the anchor in our storm. It is the anchor that holds when we are tossed to and fro. It's that solid rock that the line has been placed into, that keeps us from being lost and destroyed, because we have a line, we have a connection to something solid. So even though we might be going up and down and to and fro, the line that's anchored holds us. And we've been exploring through this series how God moves, right? We talked about how God moves in the valley. We enjoy him on the mountaintops, but we get to know him in the valley. We talked about God in the wilderness. Our deepest desire, deepest need drives us to depend upon God when we're in the wilderness. And when you're in the storm, difficult times blow out of nowhere so we can find an anchor for who we are. Here's what's so important for us to know. Never let the presence of a storm cause you to doubt the presence of God. Especially if we have an anchor in Christ. The Apostle Paul, who is one of the pillars of our faith, because he is the one that's authored most of our New Testament. He is the one that most of our theology and our understanding of our faith is built upon. But he wasn't always a Christ follower. In fact, he was a devout Jew that despised people of the way. That's what Christ followers were called in the beginning. And he went out to kind of kill them, exterminate them. But he had this great awakening where Christ revealed himself to him, and he became this passionate Christ follower. And so he goes around on these missionary journeys, right, into all parts of the world, speaking about who Jesus is, not just to himself, but to what God has done in his world, in his community. And so many people come to realize and put faith in Jesus Christ because of Paul's work and Paul's testimony and Paul's example. And he teaches with such grace and profound understanding that people are captivated by his words, but more by his power demonstration of who Jesus is. And so when he comes back to Jerusalem, they kind of get upset, the Jews do. Because he's out there and they accuse him of causing riots, they accuse him of proselyting. And since his conversion to become a Christ follower, Paul has been going through a massive storm. He's been rejected by his former people, the Jews. And he's been rejected by the people that he decided to be with, the Christ followers, because they were really suspicious that Paul had this sudden conversion. So they weren't very welcoming as well. You know, he's been stoned almost to death. He's been thrown off a wall. He's been lashed in a public square, beaten almost to death. and all the many things that he's gone through. And the storms of life have really hit Paul. So he's speaking not just from head knowledge, he's speaking from experience when he tells us about putting our faith in Jesus Christ. And so one of these times when he came to Jerusalem, he got captured, right? Because they said, you're going to face trial. And so he says, I want a trial. And so they say, we'll take you to Rome because that's where we want to try you. And so they put him on a boat, right? And you think about a boat that's tossed to and fro on the waves. Like the top of the sea is not stable, right? There's no stability there. The boat is carried by the waves. But when a boat lowers an anchor into the sea bed or the rock on the bottom of the sea, it doesn't matter how much the waves on the top go up and down, the anchor at the bottom holds the ship. It's what holds it when the waves go up. Sometimes our storms up here in our life are tossed to and fro, but again, I remind you, our anchor is what holds us. And so Paul, who had written most of this theology that we get into, is in this difficult position as a prisoner here on this boat. They've taken him and they're going to transport him to Rome. But before they leave, Paul tells them, hey, we're going to go into this sea that is notoriously bad. And it's actually a season for storms. So I don't recommend that we move or we actually leave and go out on this journey. And they were like, Paul, shut up. You're the prisoner. We're in charge. We're going to do what we're going to do. You're going to shut up and get on the boat. And that's what happened. They put him on the boat. And so, of course, this massive storm hits them, right? And it's not just an hour or a day. It's going on for days, this storm. And they're caught up in the storm. You know, they can't find a way to navigate through. They can't get out of the storm. And the people on the boat, the sailors, the people that are actually journeying as, travelers on this boat, all of them panic. They're freaking out because they realize we're not going to make it out. We're probably going to die. We're probably going to get shipwrecked, and we're going to lose not just our cargo, but our lives, and everything's a disaster. And they panic, and they go, let's just do something. So they take all the cargo that they worked so hard for, and they throw it overboard because they're like, let's make the ship lighter so we're not going to be pulled down. And they're absolutely terrified that this is going to be their fate. And so Luke, who's documenting this whole ordeal, tells us this. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and the storm continued raging, we finally all gave up hope of being saved. They're like, we're throwing in the towel. I guess this is our fate. There's no way we're going to make it out because the storm continued raging. Have you ever been in a place where the hits just keep coming? It's like you're knocked down, you're out, and they don't stop. It just keeps coming, right? And it feels like, what's going on? I can't get up. I can't make a way through this, right? You would hope things get better, but sometimes it just gets worse. You thought problems could be solved by doing this thing, but absolutely it got you into more problems, and you don't see a way out. In fact, it gets worse because another problem ends up in your life. And you're thinking, what's going on? You get laid off from work and you're struggling to find a job, and you can't find a job in this economy because it's not that easy. Your friend betrayed you and they said bad things about you, and now you hear they're going outside and talking about you in a negative way and telling other people stuff that's not true. You might be inclined to panic. You might be inclined to freak out. And that is exactly what these people did on the ship. They were freaking out. So Paul, being Paul, decides to stand up in the middle of the storm, and he could have been in chains, and he kind of gives everyone a pep talk because they're freaking out, they're running around like lunatics, and Paul kind of stands up. He's like, all right, people, I want to say something. And at this point, they give him attention because, what could it do? It can't hurt. Let's listen to the guy. Remember, he's still a prisoner. So this is what the scripture says, what Luke tells us. After they had gone a long time without food, so it's not just a storm, they don't have any food, they probably threw it overboard. Paul stood up before them and said, "Men, you should have taken my advice. I told you not to sail from Crete. Then you could have spared yourselves this damage and loss." As spiritual as Paul was, he wasn't above saying, "I told you so." Right? Sometimes we don't listen to the people in our lives because we think we know better. Right? My mother told me so. My best friend told me not to. My pastor told me not to. Even the fortune cookie at the Chinese restaurant told me not to. But I still did it anyway. And I just keep going, and now I'm ended up here. Maybe this is one of the reasons they gave up hope, right? They were in the storm because of the decision they made. Even though they were told better. See, it's easy to believe God will get you out if you believe God allowed you in. It's more difficult when you get yourself in it yourself. Then you're wondering, like, who's going to get me out? For some of the crew on the boat in the storm, it was not their fault. They were just travelers that had bought fares on the ship. They'd spend money to buy this fare. They'd spend money for whatever cargo they had to put on the ship. And then you have this guy named Paul who was mouthing off. They're like, "Shut up, Paul. We're just getting on this boat." Right? Some of them weren't considerate of the time or the season. They decided that, hey, we're going to go because we need to go. Some of them might have procrastinated and said, "You know what, we're just going to wait, and then this is the last ship, so let's jump on board." Whatever it matters, they didn't listen to Paul. And some of the crew might not even wanted to have gone, but they are not in charge. The captain's in charge. Going through a storm because of someone else's dumb decision is difficult. How many of you have been in a storm because of someone else? Careful, because that person might be sitting next to you. You don't want to talk too loud. But Paul continues, right? This is what he says. So he's got their attention. He's like, this is what's happened. I told you so. And then he continues. "But now I urge you to keep up your courage." Like, Paul, what do you mean? Like, I'm looking at this. We've been in this for days. What courage are you talking about? We're ready to give up. Because they said we've just had it. We've given up all hope. But Paul's like, "Be courageous, people." And they're like, "With what? With how? With who?" And he says, "Because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Last night, an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me." An angel stood beside me. God is with you in more ways than you can imagine. Even when you don't realize He's there, He sends His angels of protection to keep you in the middle of your storm. Angels are around you. His Spirit dwells within you. God hears our prayers. When we are crying, when we are depressed, when we are heartbroken, He is our comfort. He is our guiding light. Don't let the storm dictate your faith. God can calm even the worst storm in our life. Jesus can calm any storm. Peace is not the absence of a storm. Peace is found in the presence of Jesus. And so Paul says, "Last night an angel of God to whom I belong, whom I serve, stood beside me." Paul was having a nap in the middle of the storm. He's not stressed. He knows who he serves. And so an angel appeared to him and said, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you." Paul, you're not going to end up in the bottom of the sea. Paul, you're not going to go down with this boat. And not just you, but all the people with you. because you have a greater purpose in life than to end up being destroyed in the storm. You have to go before Caesar because you're going to face another battle. You think, oh, you're going to get escape. No, you're going to face another battle. You're going to have to deal with another fight. God's not finished with you yet because you have more people to bless. You have more people to talk to about who Jesus is. There's going to be more opportunities in your life to experience God's goodness and to share God's goodness with other people around you. There's more people that you have to point towards Jesus. So you're not done. And I'm saying the same thing to you this morning. You're not done. The storm is not going to destroy you because there's more things you are called to do. God will use what you learn in this storm to help someone through theirs. You survived cancer. Help someone else. Is faith grow by sharing what God did in your life. You've overcome unfaithfulness in your marriage. You've learned to forgive. Help someone else learn to forgive in their difficult storm. You climbed out of debt. Tell others how you did it so they can climb out of debt as well. You're 158 days sober. Tell other people what Jesus did for you so they can be helped as well. So Paul says, keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God, and it will happen just as He told me. Because faith is not what I see. Faith is in what God says. My faith is not rested in a circumstance or the size of the storm or the size of the waves or the lightning and all these other things. My faith rests in the unshakable rock of God's word. And Paul says, it's not what I see. It's not, you're looking at the storm. You're looking at the waves. You're looking at the lightning and the thunder. You don't even see the sun, but I see the Son. His name is Jesus. And He is the ultimate Son of God. I'm not going to be intimidated by the storm because I know a man who walks on water in the middle of the storm. This storm is not going to cost me my life. See, some situations you can't control. You can't control what happens to you. You can't control when the storm starts. You can't control how long it hits. You can't control how long it lasts. You can't control what people do and what people think. You can control who you listen to. You can control what you do. You can control what you say. So where do you place your faith? Trust what God says will happen, and it will happen. Not based on His words alone, but on His character. Because what He says will happen has always ever happened. Never let the presence of a storm cause you to doubt the presence of God. Especially in our economy, relationship breaks down. I don't have a job, whatever the situation is, whatever you are going through, don't allow the circumstance, the storm, to overwhelm you into thinking that God is not with you. Because He is what I need. He is my safety. He is my strength. He is my comforter. He is my source. He is my redeemer. He is my sustainer. He is my provider. He is my assurance. And He is my salvation. And so peace, I remind you, isn't found in the absence of a storm. Peace is found in the presence of a good God. Ultimately, they all survive. The ship's lost, just as God says. But not one of them lose their lives. See, your storm is not here to destroy you, but to reveal the power of God in your life. Your storm is not here to take you out, but to show you that God is able, even in the midst of your most extreme circumstances and worst storm. As you probably guessed, Chanel and I survived our hurricane. Actually, to be honest, it was quite disappointing because all we got was a little rain because apparently the storm changed course and went in a different direction. But hey, God is good. And for you and me, what we get to do, what we get to have, is what we get to decide. That's all we get. We can't determine when the storm hits and how long it lasts and where it comes from. All we can do is decide how we respond in the middle of the storm, especially when we know that we have God with us. And let me tell you, you are far better at life preparing for uneventual, unexpected storms when you have Jesus in your life. Because as we always say, Jesus makes your life better and makes you better at life. When you have him on board, he can speak to any storm. And I would encourage you to read some of the Gospels where you see what Jesus does in the middle of storms. There's some amazing descriptions of how Jesus deals with storms. One where he's on the boat and when he speaks to things. But learn to lean on Jesus in the middle of your storm. Because it's not the power of the storm you have to worry about when you have the one who can calm the storm with you. So let me ask you, what storm are you going through right now? What circumstance in your world, in your situation, in your life are you feeling a little bit overwhelmed with? That you feel like this is just a little bit too much. We've all had a storm experience, and if you're young enough, you might not have, but you will, because that's just life. It's who we anchor ourselves in the middle of the storm that helps us through the storm. It's how we respond. It's who we lean into that will determine how we come through it. So who are you anchored in? Are you anchored in your own sufficiency, in your own intellect, in your own ability, in your own qualifications, in your own experience? Because sometimes storms don't make sense. It's not logical. It's just overwhelming. And so you might have intellect, you might have knowledge, and lots of those people have perished in storms, not because they're dumb, but because they weren't anchored. So who keeps you safe? I know who does for me. Who does for you? So let me say this. If you have not made a decision to follow Jesus, here's your opportunity. Make that the most important decision of your life. In our storm, God is with us. That's why he came to show us that he is not a distant God. He's not an absent God. He is God with us. He is close to us. His name is Emmanuel. And that's what the angel Gabriel said to Mary. He says, look, a virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. He is always with us. So I have two questions for you. Well, one, kind of three, but kind of jammed it together to two. So number 1/2. How has the storm rattled your faith? Right? How will you respond now that you know God is with you? See, there's a whole different level of response when you have the storm breaker and the storm calmer with you. The way you respond is different than when you don't know how to deal with it and you're by yourself. You might panic, you might stress, you might make bad decisions, but when you know the guy who's able to solve the problem is with you, you're a little bit more courageous, you know? And Paul's like, yeah, have courage, people. I know who God is. He's going to take care of this. He says, be strong, be courageous. Take courage, men. Because I know who I serve. So has the storm rattled you? Maybe you're on the edge and maybe you're questioning Why am I going through this? Why am I going through this scenario? What's happening in my world? Did I do something? Do I deserve this? What's going on? Why would God do this to me? Right? I'm sure the sailors in the ship would ask the same questions. Why did God cause us to end up in this storm? But He didn't. They made that decision. He just pulled them out of it. So how will you respond when you know God is with you in the middle of the storm? Question 2. How can you invite Jesus into your storm? Oftentimes we try to deal with it ourselves. We try to come up with human ways, human inventions, human logic to try and figure out what's the best course through. And as I said before, sometimes storms aren't logical. They don't make sense. And that's why we need God to help us navigate through. It doesn't make sense for someone that you have been with in a relationship a while to just suddenly leave. It might not be a logical thing, but it's an emotional decision. And it might not make sense to your logical brain. But how do you invite God in the middle of that? How do you invite God in the middle of your boss making bad decisions that eventually cause you to lose your job? You didn't have any cause with that. You didn't do anything. But you need Jesus in the middle of your storm, because He can help you navigate through. And I remind you, this storm is not here to destroy you. It's to help you see how God moves in the middle of your worst situation. So let's pray.
Thank you for joining us today at Transform Church. We hope that you were encouraged by the message, and we are so grateful that you spent this time with us. Now, if you've decided to follow Jesus or just have some questions, please get in touch with us using the email address shown below. We would love to guide you as you take these important steps. If you would like to visit us in person, we would love to meet you. Just let us know when you will be joining us, and we will be here to welcome you with open arms and to show you around. We hope that you will consider supporting us, and we would greatly appreciate your financial support to help us continue bringing these messages. Please type in the link shown below into your web browser, and it will provide you with all of our giving options. It's been awesome having you with us, and we hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to apply what you've learned today, and come back and let us know how this has helped you. It's bye for now, and we hope you have an amazing week. See you next time.